Hello, and welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. And this month, DerpyTW's chosen topic is the, I guess, penultimate fight in Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance between Senator Armstrong and Jack Raiden. This is a pretty famous fight. There's a part of it that's very commonly memed where big Chongo senator guy is getting punched really, really fast, but it doesn't seem to be doing much. That is often used as a meme format. There's lots of parts of this that are memed. So DerpyTW says, this is a test to see if you've played or seen Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I'm certainly aware of it, but I haven't played it. Basically, watch this video, and the video was basically the fight scene. I'll link that in the comments if you want to go watch it. And Derpy wants me to explain, like, what is even going on. Is this how America is? Weird tech ninja assassins trying to kill honorable Ivy League football playing senators? What do you think of the video overall? Which side are you on? Enjoy. Yeah, it's long, so this parlay will be shorter. I spent the first half of it watching the video. Yes, I've seen this fight memed a lot, but I've actually never seen the dialogue that it comes with before, which was pretty eye-opening because, like, it's basically the same as the memed. Like, it turns out the memed ones weren't a meme. That's just the real version of that's the real dialogue in the game. So that's a whole thing. Yeah, if you haven't seen this, or if you want to go watch it, or if you don't and you just want me to explain this thing. Senator Armstrong is a sort of hyper stylized caricature of a certain type of American politician or politicker. That it's weird. You sort of go so far in one direction that you cease to appeal to anyone. Like Senator Armstrong kind of violates pretty much anything that would get you elected for any group of people in the United States, except people that don't really understand what you're talking about. A big aspect of my experience of American politics, being a person who lives in America and finds it pretty frustrating how people are just talking past each other, is how a lot of the time people invoke an idea like what America stands for, right? Now, if you live in America or you know some stuff about America, when I said what America stands for just then, you might have thought a lot of things. And that's kind of the trick, right? When people say that stuff in politics, they are being intentionally vague so that you assume they just mean what you care about. Like, they just mean your thing. But they don't, of course. They don't care at all about your needs. They care about getting elected. They may care about their own designs, but they're going to purposefully make it unclear exactly what those are, because that is how you get elected. I'm not trying to claim that every single politician everywhere in all democratic-like systems is corrupt, but it's fundamental to understand that the basic way by which one person with one idea appeals to a lot of people is usually not by that person just becoming some sort of unholy chimera of everybody's ideas. It's usually by basically lying and just saying something very vague that could mean what a lot of voters think. It doesn't, but it could mean that thing. And so then they get lots of votes. Now, Raiden is, to me, the way Jack is portrayed in a lot of the memes and in this is much more as a kind of common person, I guess. There's a lot of moments where he just says, what the hell are you talking about? Senator Armstrong is mouthing off about, like, ending war by using war as a business, which, like, that makes sense. It's just very evil and corrupt. And Jack is just like, what's going on? Which is a lot of people's, maybe correct assessment of what a lot of politicians say nowadays. You hear the thing they're saying, and if you take the thing that's being said at face value, rather than what is sort of intended, which is they're just trying to get you to assume you care about the same thing as them. But if you really think about what is being said, you go, huh? What? Or like they sort of didn't say anything is another very common one. So the fun of this fight scene to me, when you say, what did you think of the video overall? Or what do you think of this scene overall? Derpy, I think what's fun about this is that The conversation seems complicated, but really isn't, in my opinion. It's basically just self-serving politician parodies themselves while a stand-in for a normal person says, "What are you on about?" And the fun part is, like, that sounds complicated, but it isn't, and they sort of portray that by the characters just beating each other up. And it's not a fight scene of much shall we say choreography, right? Mind you, there was someone who choreographed the fight scene. I'm just trying to say it's not as if they're it's not a very, maybe we should say, theatrical or glorified fight scene. It's just them beating each other up, more like a barroom brawl, at least for most of its duration. And then, of course, it gets crazy. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance in general goes up to 11 a lot. And so that's why I think it's telling that this is mostly a slugfest for a lot of the duration, and it only kind of pops off at the end. Again, I think that's meant to represent classic Metal Gear writing, a bit on the nose, that it's basically just people having a slap fight when people talk like this. It sounds like they're talking about their political views, but really they're just saying "no you" and hitting each other in the face, which is why I always smile when I see this fight scene. It's just a very good depiction of how self-defeating and inherently pointless that type of discussion is, because the people really discussing their views, that would be good, but they're not. They're just using terms that the other person assumes mean something else, so nobody is understanding each other. And anytime one person says, "I like, why don't you care about our personal freedoms?" the other person says, "Well, I do care about our personal freedoms," and those two people don't mean the same thing by that, so there's really no point in them discussing any further. In fact, I often think that when these discussions happen in real life, they make people basically think about the other side less critically, because it seems like they demonstrated by discussing with the person that the other side of the fence is just stupid. That's what it makes it seem like, because again, people are using these words, but they don't really mean the same thing by them usually. Again, it's a lot of fun rather than just frustrating to portray this as people just beating the crap out of each other. I'm not sure there's a lot else to say, in my opinion. To be honest, I think this is a pretty simple scene from a sort of storytelling perspective. It's fun to see something I mentioned in the previous parlay I recorded, but a very common trope in fiction, that the beefier or stronger physically character is meant to be inherently understood to be the evil one, and the more normal body type person that generally uses a little more speed over power is generally understood to be the protagonist. Neither of these people is doing something that looks dignified necessarily, but you can tell who you're supposed to be rooting for very clearly by the way that the fight is framed. You know, the way Senator Armstrong's character design is built, that's just sort of assumed to be inherently evil. Something I always wonder about this is, in video games, in gaming in general, really in fiction in general, I'd argue, that's a pretty established trope. What do people who don't ever see that kind of thing think when they see this scene? You know, do they feel like Raiden or, Cyborg Jack here is evil because he looks more like a ninja or an assassin, or less physically human, more of a cyborg? I actually don't know any of the lore of this game, so maybe Senator Armstrong is not mostly an organic human. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, we think, maybe because we have a lot of experience seeing this type of thing in games or just in media, oh, the guy with the suit and tie who's like jacked and stuff, he's obviously evil, right? But you see what I'm trying to say? Like, for a lot of people, they might go into this and think, what's going on here? Like, why is that being portrayed as evil? Or they might think it's novel, for example. Whereas I would say this is a pretty common trope in fiction. I just think that's interesting how it reads. It's really relying on our prejudices, I guess. Not that they're unfounded. I do think that if you are wearing the suit and tie and you support the way that, work culture works at the moment, yeah, it's pretty immoral. That's pretty evil. But that doesn't mean that wearing a suit and tie makes you evil. I don't know. I just think that's interesting. That's all. Definitely the appropriate clothing for a character like this. But yeah, It's fun. I do also think, to go in a different direction, while this is a pretty common tableau of American politics on the surface, I do think there's something else going on here. You said, is this how America is? Weird tech ninja assassins trying to kill honorable Ivy League football playing senators? This sort of techie ninja thing that's going on with Raiden is very America as well. I feel like there's a lot in there. There's sort of treating the millennials or the younger generation as being the source of all the problems, even though the other thing that those people are always told is that people don't know how technology works and only they magically know how technology works. There's a lot of magic thinking related to the younger generation's ability with technology, which is a complicated subject. Why do people who are generally younger appear to a lot of older people to have this sort of innate affinity for technology? I don't think it's because they just magically have it or something. Although we did grow up with a lot of these things. I know I, speaking for myself, like grew up with the idea that we have small handheld devices that do something. For a while, it was mostly MP3 players. It became smartphones, computers, basically. And smaller gaming devices as well. Basically a console that you can hold in your hand. The Steam Deck, the Switch. And that's very normal to me. And I've learned the dexterity of using controllers like that. I happen to have small hands, but for example, my dad, shout out to my dad, has big hands. There's something inherently less convenient for him about using those controllers, but he also just isn't used to using those controllers physically. And so there is a divide that is created because there is some physical way in which that stuff wasn't made for all of the older people in not just America, but I do have this come up in my daily life a lot, which I think helps fuel the fire. A lot of these misunderstandings or blame games come from a shred of truth that is overreacted to, you know? And so again, I think for the sort of blaming the younger generation and everything, or they're so different or whatever, part of the shred of truth is this idea that it is inconvenient for someone who didn't grow up with this type of technology to be surrounded by, you know, it's infinitely more powerful from a sort of productivity perspective to be able to use modern technology, but it wasn't built for people who would benefit from it. That's true. I'm not sure it could be built for them. Like, I'm not sure how you would do that exactly. But you see what I'm trying to say. That is unfair a little bit. Like, that frustration comes from somewhere. It's just obviously stupid to blame people that were born into a world that is like that for that. Like, that's obviously not their fault. That's stupid. But none of you, I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, let's not go on about that topic. We all know that doesn't make sense. But I think it's worth noting, it's not like that doesn't come from anywhere. And I do think the idea of it's a very edgy idea of the technologically savvy kid who studied a lot, you know, while they were off playing sports ball, I studied the blade, like that very edgelord thing, is evoked by Raiden. Like, that is definitely a thing that is being taken for a bit of a ride by this game. In my opinion, it's not like Raiden is being portrayed as being this pure glorious protagonist in my experience of the game, which is that I have not played it. I've just seen lots of media that parodied it. Treating him like a bit of a normie, I guess, does play to the lack of practical knowledge that I think is characteristic of the younger generations born into a world that has gotten a bit complicated, and then they're treated like they're supposed to understand it all. I'm speaking about myself, really. Lots of people aren't like that. I don't mean to throw whole groups of people under the bus. That's exactly what's being done wrong. Just to say that that definitely comes from somewhere. And in the framing of this scene, Raiden is kind of meant to represent more like me, somebody doing a technology or modern focused job that really didn't exist, 10 years ago. That people of the older generations don't even understand, or I have trouble even explaining a lot of the time. To be fair, mine is maybe a little more complicated than, like, how do you explain Parley to someone? Anyway, this has been a problem for me from time to time. All of this is just to say that I I like this scene mostly because I think it's aware that it's quite over the top and ridiculous. It is not saying, politicians bad, gamers good. I don't personally think. It's more saying that the type of conversation that these characters are having is a bit silly, maybe a bit more shallow than it oftentimes appears. I often would put it a different way. If you're confused when you hear people talking about stuff like that, you are understanding. It is confusing. They are talking past each other. So I don't know, a bit of fun. To be blunt, I don't feel like there's a lot to say about the fight itself. So I hope you were okay with me giving my thoughts on when I watch this, and it's very clearly a sort of political tableau about the country I live in, and kind of me. Like I am somewhat represented by Raiden in this. The way that is depicting like big groups of people definitely calls to mind a lot of thoughts. And so basically I just shared those thoughts. I hope that was okay. I don't have anything else to say. It was fun. I didn't think I'd be asked to parlay about this very commonly memed fight. But as for the one part of this parlay that I very rarely say this, cannot answer, explain to me what is even going on beyond metaphorically, I have no idea. And that's all I'm gonna say.